Welcome to episode 189 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Laws Guy. It's May 8, 1954, Manila. The second Asian Games are reaching their final days. Football delegates from across the continent are gathered on the sidelines, and Asian football decides it needs a home of its own. Not an Olympic committee, not a colonial-era sporting circuit, not just a football tournament inside the Asian Games, but a confederation. And on this day, 1954, the AFC, the Asian Football Confederation, is born. 13 founding members, the first president from Hong Kong, first general secretary, who has once been called Asia's king of football, and a mission that sounds simple enough until you look at the map. Because Asia is not one football culture. It is East Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, West Asia, and Central Asia. It is post-war reconstruction, decolonization, Cold War politics, religious and regional fault lines, new states, old empires, Olympic ambition, and football trying to organize a continent before the continent itself has agreed what Asia really means. But how did we get here? Well, we start with the timing. 1954 is one of those years when football governance is being rebuilt at continental level. FIFA already exists. The World Cup exists. But the structure underneath FIFA is still uneven. South America has long had CONMEBOL. Europe is about to create UEFA the next month in June, and Africa will create CAF a few years later. Asia moves first in this post-war wave. The impulse had begun 2 years earlier at the 1952 Helsinki Olympics. There, football representatives from different Asian countries met and discussed the need for a continental body. And that matters because Helsinki was not just another Olympics. It was the first Olympics after the war in which Japan returned to the Olympic fold. That same year, Tokyo announced its first post-war Olympic candidacy, not yet the successful 1964 bid, but the 1960 bid that began the road back to Olympic Asia. So there's a wider atmosphere here. Asia is re-entering. Asia is organizing. Asia is trying to show itself not as a collection of teams invited into someone else's tournament, but as a sporting region with its own calendar and institutions. The Asian Games are central to that. The first Asian Games had been staged in New Delhi in 1951. They were born from older ideas, the Far Eastern Games, the Western Asiatic Games, and post-war Asian solidarity. By 1954, Manila hosts the second edition. The Games bring together athletes, officials, and administrators from across the continent. That physical gathering is key. In an age before easy travel and instant communication, you build institutions when everyone is already in the same city. So the football delegates meet. One of the important figures is John Cleland, representing the Philippines. He's a Scottish national with a decidedly Asian outlook and provides leadership in the Manila discussions. The new confederation's first president is Sir Man Kam Lo of Hong Kong. The first general secretary is Wai Tong, one of the greatest Asian football figures of the pre-war era, a Chinese and Hong Kong football legend, Olympic coach, administrator, and later a FIFA vice president. And that Hong Kong access matters. Hong Kong was one of the best connected football hubs in Asia, colonial British and Chinese, maritime, international. It could host a secretariat, connect federations, and provide administrators who understood both British football traditions and Asian sporting politics. The founding members tell the story of Asia's complexity. Afghanistan, Burma, what we now call Myanmar, Chinese Taipei, Hong Kong, India, Israel, Indonesia, Japan, Korea Republic, Pakistan, the Philippines, Singapore, and South Vietnam. That is not a neat block. It stretches from the Mediterranean edge to East Asia, from South Asia to Southeast Asia. It includes countries that will later become politically impossible to keep in the same football room. It includes Israel, which will eventually leave Asian football after boycotts and expulsion. And it doesn't include Australia, which will spend decades looking toward Asia before finally joining the AFC in 2006. But in 1954, the point is not that Asia is easy. The point is that Asia needs a football mechanism precisely because it is difficult. And while the administrators are meeting, the football at the Asian Games is happening around them. Matches are being played at the Rizal Memorial Sports Complex. Taiwan, South Korea, Indonesia, Burma, India, Japan, Pakistan, Singapore, Hong Kong, Afghanistan, Vietnam, and the Philippines. The football tournament is itself a map of the region. On the final day, Taiwan beat South Korea 5-2 to win gold. That same week, Asian football gives itself a governing body. And then comes the important next step, FIFA recognition. The AFC is sanctioned by FIFA in June 1954, and suddenly Asian football has an official continental voice inside the world game. So what did it mean? Well, first the AFC created its own national team championship. Until then, the Asian Games had been the major pan-Asian football stage. But a multi-sport event is not the same thing as a football confederation's own championship, so the AFC moved quickly. 2 years after its founding, the first AFC Asian Cup was staged in Hong Kong in 1956. 4 teams reached the final tournament. Hosts Hong Kong, South Korea, Israel, and South Vietnam. South Korea won it, then retained the title in 1960. That makes the Asian Cup the second oldest continental national team championship in world football, with what we now call Copa America the oldest, as it kicked off in 1916. Then the balance of power began to shift. India had started strongly in Asian football. They won the Asian Games in 1951, finished 4th at the 56 Olympics, won Asian Games gold again in 62, and finished runners-up in the 64 Asian Cup. For a while, India were not a sleeping giant. They were awake. Then they faded. We talked about all this in episode 130 on March 10. Definitely worth a listen. Israel won the Asian Cup in 64, but politics made their position impossible. Arab and Muslim majority nations increasingly refused to play them, and by 74, Israel were out of the AFC. That is one of the great reminders that Asian football has never been only sport. Borders, recognition, religion, war, and diplomacy all entered the fixture list. Iran then dominated. Asian Cup titles in 68, 72, and 76. In 80, Kuwait won. Then Saudi Arabia emerged in the 80s and 90s. In the 90s and 2000s, Japan rose dramatically, helped by professionalism and the J-League. It became the Asian Cup's most successful nation. South Korea remained a constant force without adding it to its early 2 titles. Qatar, in our own era, has won back-to-back Asian Cups. So the AFC's competitive map keeps moving. South Asia starts brightly and recedes. East Asia rises. West Asia asserts itself. Southeast Asia remains passionate, often packed with football culture, but still chasing the continental summit. And over time, the AFC has to manage this by creating layers, regional federations, zones, qualifiers, sub-regional tournaments, and eventually a 47-member confederation stretching across one of the most diverse sporting geographies on Earth. Also, the AFC created a club structure. The first Asian Champion Club tournament began in 1967. It was small, fragile, and uneven compared to the modern AFC Champions League elite. But it mattered. Hapoel Tel Aviv beat Selangor in the final. That alone tells you how different early Asian club football looked, an Israeli club winning Asia's first club crown against the Malaysian side. The competition then struggled, disappeared for years, and returned in the mid-1980s as the Asian Club Championship. Over time it became the AFC Champions League, and now the Champions League elite. South Korean clubs, Japanese clubs, Saudi clubs, Iranian clubs, Emirati clubs, Chinese and Australian clubs. The club game became another expression of Asia's shifting power. Al Hilal, Pohang Steelers, Urawa Red Diamonds, Al Ittihad, Jeonbuk, Ulsan, Al Ain, Guangzhou, Western Sydney Wanderers. These are all part of the AFC's club history. And Asian clubs have also made themselves visible globally. Kashima Antlers reached the Club World Cup final in 2016. Al Ain did it in 2018, and Al Hilal in 2022. None won the final, but all forced the rest of the world to take Asian club football seriously. Finally, the AFC's World Cup story became a long fight for respect. For decades, Asia had too few places and too little credibility in the world game. DPR Korea changed the imagination in 1966 by beating Italy and reaching the World Cup quarterfinals. Saudi Arabia did it in 1994 through Said Ul Aviran's extraordinary solo run against Belgium. Then came 2002. Korea Republic and Japan co-hosted the World Cup. Japan reached the knockout stage for the first time, and South Korea reached the semi-finals, the best World Cup finish by an Asian team. Australia's arrival in 2006 changed the confederation again. The Socceroos had spent decades trapped in Oceania's playoff logic, good enough to dominate a region, but not guaranteed a World Cup. Moving into Asia gave them meaningful competition and a clearer pathway. In 2015, Australia won the Asian Cup on home soil, and suddenly a former Oceania power had become Asian champion. And that too is part of the AFC's identity. Asia is not static. It absorbs, it argues, it redraws, and then it grows. That is why May 8, 1954 matters. Not because one meeting solved Asian football, but because one meeting gave Asian football the tool with which to keep solving itself. Before we go, 3 things to take away from May 8, 1954. First, the AFC was born from post-war Asian organization. The Asian Games give football officials the platform, and Manila gave them the room. Second, the founding members already contained the future tensions of Asian football: Israel, South Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia, West Asia, and eventually the long question of Australia. And third, the AFC's legacy is tournament architecture: Asian Cup, World Cup qualifying, Olympic pathways, club competitions, regional federations. The Confederation turned Asian football from scattered participation into a continental system. On this day in 1954, football delegates in Manila founded the Asian Football Confederation, and Asian football began building the institution that would turn a vast, divided continent into one of the game's essential worlds. That is all for episode 189 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. Tomorrow, go to May 9, 1951, and to England's first international against Argentina at Wembley, played on the sidelines of the Grand Festival of Britain. See you tomorrow.